Hey guys, and welcome to episode 17 on the Health Spot with Omar. In this episode, I talk with Emma from Mindfulness, a company supporting the mental health and well-being of children of now and the future. We talk about emotional regulation, the prison system, and how we can help children deal with certain situations better. Enjoy. How's things since the last time I contacted you? Because I think I contacted you last year when I was starting all this podcast stuff, and then my bad, I did say I was going to get in touch, and I think I did. And then I think from my side, my team didn't get in touch about times and dates, and you said you could do them. So apologies from my side. Tell me what's been going on since we last got in touch.
Yeah, so the business has diversified quite a lot, to be fair. I mean, we started very much within the education sector. It's because that's where my background is. So we're now working across a range of sectors that includes criminal justice. So we've diversified a lot. Our main aim always is to help those who are most in need and those who are facing barriers to positive mental health outcomes. So it just kind of made sense to make that new transition. So yeah, we've been busy. We've got some exciting things going on.
Amazing, and I'm looking forward to get into that. So for the listeners out there who don't know who you are, could you let them know who you are, like introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Bayou. I am the founder and CEO of Mindfulness. It's mindfulness with two eyes and it's intentional. It's not a typo. So my professional background, my bachelor's degree, so on and so forth, as I mentioned, was in education. And then strangely, just before COVID hit, I decided to found Mindfulness. I always say that I founded Mindfulness to deliver the services that I've needed at different points in my life. So as a child and now an adult, I've always struggled with anxiety myself. I've been a parent trying to support her own daughter's mental health and facing the challenges that can sometimes come with that. And as I say, I've been an educator and kind of witnessing growing numbers of children presenting with mental health concerns. So Mindfulness kind of was founded to provide those services to people in a relatable, accessible way, essentially.
Amazing. And what's been the journey so far? Because I know when I started it is a bit like, oof, you start on 0 followers and you're posting here and there, and then you have to keep up with the posting and stuff like that. And then at the same time, you're doing that the hard graft in the background. So what's that been like since you started?
So we were really, really lucky. I actually entered something called the Health Entrepreneur Scheme with an organisation, A2 Dominion Housing Association. Essentially, it's a little bit like Dragon's Den, but for health businesses. So we went through that process, and I was really lucky, especially being a one-man band at the time. They kind of supported us to start the business, helped us with our first funding, and they've continued to be a really big support. So that was kind of setting up. We have a social impact, not-for-profit branch to the business, and that's actually where we started. So kind of developing, co-designing, and then delivering community interventions for those who are facing disadvantage. So that can be anything as it stands today. We've got everything from free mental health focused football sessions for children who are living in poverty, right through to parenting workshops for parents whose children might be struggling with their mental well-being and can't access services. Then we have our kind of day-to-day services that we deliver across various sectors. So they can be consultancy. We can literally be in a school on the Monday training the staff on how to support pupil mental health. And then on the Tuesday, we might be in a prison working with young men who are in prison. So wow. We're trying to, tackle it in every way we can.
That's so interesting that you're going into the prison side of things, because two points, actually. One point I would say is mental health has turned in such a way where it's like there's been a big push on like this actually is a big important thing over the past couple of years. What do you think? Like, it's just like suddenly it's just like blown up, saying like the mental health part of life on our health is just as important as our physical health and what we eat and things like that. What do you think why has that just all of a sudden blown up?
I think a lot of it is to do with COVID, if I'm being honest. I think the world stopped Omar. And I think we all, to some degree, experience some form of impact on our mental health and well-being. And the world was a little bit quieter and a little bit more ready to listen and kind of take that on board and understand how important that was. And so I do think, as much as COVID was extremely detrimental to overall mental health and well-being, it did shine a light on how important it was. And it was at the same time that there was a lot of kind of media attention and stuff like that around the subject. So it's bringing that awareness to the table. And I think that's super important also, to tackle the stigma, because these are conversations we should be having in the same way that we sit with our friends and talk about we should be going to the gym for our heart health and, you know, all of these things. It is no different than sitting with a group of friends and talking about how actually maybe you need to have some therapy.
Yeah, because I read some reports, and I need to post it up actually. When COVID happened, people were dying from just being lonely.
I mean, on a personal level, I had just got divorced. I had just moved into a property on my own. I had to shield because I was in the vulnerable group, and it was just me and my daughter. And I really struggled. And as I say, this kind of all fed into founding Mindfulness ultimately, because I was doing what I was doing, had the qualifications I had, knew what I knew, and I was still struggling as a parent and as an individual. So I thought it was important to have those services and have them be accessible to people.
You spoke about going to prisons, because I don't know much about prisons, but correct me if I'm wrong, like the rehab for prisoners, I'm guessing there wasn't a mental health aspect to that?
I think, again, it's something that is becoming more apparent that there should be, and I think it's nice to see that the discourse is turning to that, and it's important. I mean, as part of what we do and kind of as part of tackling things at every level, myself and team members of the team are members of the all-party parliamentary group for a fit and healthy childhood. On Tuesday, we went and gave the keynote speech at the monthly meeting, and it was on adverse childhood experiences. Now, obviously, experiencing adversity in childhood negatively impacts across a range of life outcomes, one of them being mental health. If you look at these statistics around the number of people who are in prison who have a special educational need or disability and who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, it's insane. And I think it's important that we address those things, because these behaviours that lead to people being in prison often are as a result of poor mental health and adverse childhood experiences. So if we don't address those root causes, and I mean, it's being really widely reported at the moment, this state of our prison system. And if you're not addressing the root causes that put people in prison, you're just perpetuating these generational cycles constantly, aren't you?
Definitely. My personal experience, because when my parents got divorced, I was a teenager, probably 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
Didn't think much of it. Mm-hmm. I was like, you know, it's not going to affect me. People said, family was saying, don't worry, it's not going to affect you. But as I grew older, and when I got married and when I had kids, I started to realize the decisions I'm making were based on my parents being divorced. And I was like, wow, like it has actually affected me. And it didn't hit me until I had my first child. So I think, you know, what you're doing is amazing. I think what I want to get into as well is for the listeners out there who have no idea what mindfulness is, what is mindfulness?
Really simply, mindfulness is just being completely present in the moment. It's being aware of where you are and what you're doing, but also not being overwhelmed by it. So I know from my own experience, I often say that the inside of my brain is like there's 45 plates spinning on little poles, and it all gets very busy and very noisy in there. And by practicing mindfulness, you're just able to step away from the plates and kind of leave them to spin. They're still spinning, but you're able to kind of focus and be present in the moment.
Okay, brilliant. I guess what's the benefits of being mindful in those situations? If you could give me any benefits of that.
Yeah. Of course. So mindfulness helps you to understand your emotions better, which I know we're going to talk about later on. It can help you cope with difficult or negative thoughts, can help you to feel calmer, and it can also boost your attention and your concentration span. So there really are some positive benefits to practicing some simple mindfulness techniques.
I've realized with me, just like yourself, spinning loads of plates. And before, I used to just separate myself and put different percentages of energy in each plate, kind of thing. And then I realized, and then my wife says, like, you can't multitask. And I was like, first I was in denial for a bit. I was like, in my head, I was like, shut up, I can. But then I was like, I can't, I actually can't. And then reading some business books and like some mindfulness books and things like that, they even say like you need to do things one at a time so you can put all your energy in one thing.
Mhm.
Put some stuff in the background just to make sure you do the most important thing first, because that's going to be the most impactful, whatever the situation it's based on. So wellness and mindfulness for children. You mentioned about why you started mindfulness. Is that pretty much the reason why? Because like I think parents find it difficult. I mean, I have clients come to me saying, "Oh, I'm finding it difficult getting my child to think in a different way because when they go into school, like when they're at home, I don't know if you find this as well. When they're at home, when they're with like friends and family, they're like outgoing and everything. But when they go back into school, they kind of clam up, where it's like they don't really tell the teacher how they're feeling about certain situations because they're a bit afraid. So
Mhm.
going back to my question, why is wellness and mindfulness important for children?
First things first, I always am very transparent about the fact, because you fed it back to why I started mindfulness. I don't run mindfulness because I am the guru of managing my own mental well-being. It's actually exactly the opposite. I really struggle with anxiety. I come across to people who don't know me as a super confident, outgoing person. But actually, that's a response to my anxiety. I tell people I'm a puffer fish. And often, the louder and the more confident I seem, the more anxious and uncomfortable I am inside. It's the way I respond to my anxiety to protect myself. And it's, again, it feeds into everything I do. Mindfulness within that is foundational, really, for mental well-being. If children can learn and use some simple mindfulness techniques, it supports them to effectively regulate their emotions. And I know, again, it's something you and I are going to talk about, but if children can understand and regulate their emotions, they really, really do have a firm foundation for optimum mental health throughout their lifetimes.
Obviously, our kids won't understand it now, but you'll set them up really nicely for the future, isn't it?
Our emotions, our thoughts, and our behaviours, they're all interlinked. So once you can understand and master your emotions, the others kind of feed in quite nicely.
The way the world works and understands mindfulness and feelings and emotions these days is totally different to how it was probably about 10, 20 years ago when I was growing up. Like, and when I was growing up, it's very like old school where it's like, just deal with it. It doesn't matter how you feel, just get it done.
With it, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's only a good thing people start talking about how they're feeling because, like, I think during COVID times, people, like you said, people start to realize that you're sitting at home alone. Like there's no one to talk to. I think because I was mental health first aider trained at my previous workplace, and we start to realize that we were given like a list of people to look after in the workplace, and the feedback where people were saying, well, some people were saying that they were actually struggling because they're sitting at home, they're seeing the same screen every day, they're in the same room, they're not doing anything else. I found for me it was a big learning curve, whereas like I understood how like everyone deals with their emotions differently.
I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. It is so individual to everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this topic is so important. So getting into children. So I get this question asked a lot. So the bonus that I've got you on, and I've had it for a while. So the question was that I keep getting asked is how to get children in primary school to learn to use their voice to express their feelings, because some kids freeze up and clam up, like I mentioned earlier, and expressing their emotions, but being comfortable when they're being comfortable doing things in a group, in a class. So an example would be, I've asked a teacher saying that, for example, my daughter, she's feeling like she's come home sad because of a certain situation. And she's like, huh? No, that's a bit strange. She's been fine with everyone else.
Mm.
And from a parent's point of view and a teacher's point of view, it's like you feel like you get two different aspects.
Yeah.
Where I got my kid coming home crying, And she's saying, oh, I was upset because of this reason. And then as parents, we're just like, well, why didn't you tell the teacher? There's no answer. So I'll be interested to find out from yourself, how would you get around that? How do you get children to get comfortable, like primary school children, to get comfortable speaking out about how they feel and not feel a bit, I don't know, shy maybe, or a bit scared to speak out?
Yeah. I think so. I'll try and condense what's a really big answer. I think it has to be part of a whole school approach. Schools have to be invested in developing emotional literacy and emotional regulation with all children across the board. I think what is important to point out before I go into kind of how you can do that is that it's actually a really, really common question that I get. It comes down to essentially, when your children are at home and they are with you, you're their safe space. So they are able to, it's why you'll also have a lot of children who will come home and display extreme anger. And you'll go to the teacher and say, you know, kind of what's happened today? They've come home and just exploded. And the teacher says, oh, they've been fine all day. It's because they're masking at school. They're masking at school because their friends are there, and there's all of these social aspects of speaking out, which is why it has to be part of a whole school approach, and the school has to be a safe space for them. But they mask all day, they come home and they either explode into anger or they break down into tears because they're finally home, they're finally safe, the adrenaline's gone, and they can communicate those emotions. So I think that's really important to point out. In regard to kind of practical ways to do this, so our key message at Mindfulness, we start everything, whether it's with staff, pupils, parents, there are no bad emotions. And if you can get that message across to your children, first and foremost, you're onto a winner. There are no bad emotions. We are all going to experience a range of emotions throughout our lifetimes, and all of them are normal and okay. Some emotions we will experience a little bit more intensely than others. At Mindfulness, and the way we explain it to the children is we call them big emotions. Now, those emotions, they're big because they can become overwhelming and they can lead us to lose control. So that's kind of the key message we start with, and that creates you an environment where children feel safe to start to communicate and understand their emotions. We then break kind of emotional regulation down into three main areas within each that you need to kind of support children to develop some skills within. So your first area is the ability to understand and communicate the emotions they're feeling. It's emotional literacy. In the same way that we support our children to read and write for literacy, we need to support our children to develop emotional literacy. They are not born with the vocabulary that they need to communicate the wide range of them. I still struggle to communicate it now sometimes. You know, we do as parents, we still
do. Yeah.
And again, it leads right back to the fact that emotional literacy wasn't developed when we were at school. So yeah, one of the first things we need to do is get our children to understand and communicate their emotions. Now, in practical terms, there's a range of really simple ways parents can do this. You can just name the emotion you're feeling in a really age-appropriate way to your children. There is a lot to be learned from you saying, Dad feels really frustrated right now. Work isn't going well. Do you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to go and take 10 minutes and meditate, or, you know, whatever your choice is. But by doing that, you're naming the range of different emotions. You're starting to get your children to open that dialogue with you. And then you can move on again to really simple things like, if you're out and about, maybe be careful where you do it, because if your children are anything like mine, they'll be pointing. But just, you know, oh, look, that man over there, he's got his head to the floor and he's dragging his feet. How do you think he might be feeling? You're just developing that vocabulary through really simple things.
Yeah, it's like you're exercising the mind as well for the child.
It's exactly that. You're opening that line of communication. You're normalizing these conversations around emotions, but you're also developing their vocabulary. How many 2-year-olds do you know who would know the emotion jealous?
Well,
say in the same way that they wouldn't know the word therefore, because they're developing their literacy. So it's exactly the same principle, just applied to emotions. And once you have that, I mean, you can, as I say, you can do lots of things. You could have a check-in wheel on the wall, and every day all of you check in on your emotions. Really simplistic things, but you're just starting to give them that vocabulary around emotions. So once they've done that, and they are able to understand what they're feeling and to communicate it to other people, you then move on to helping them to identify situations that can trigger those big emotions for them. So some children might be really triggered by going to Tesco. Other supermarkets are available, but let's use Tesco. And it might be too overstimulating for them, and they don't like it when you tell them no, they can't have something, and that's a triggering situation for them. Once you've helped your child to identify what those situations are, what is super important though, and this is where the practicality of it comes in, as parents, we always want to protect our children. So if a gymnastics class was triggering for my daughter and made her feel anxious, my instant reaction as a parent is going to be, she's not going. But actually, in life, we can't avoid triggering situations as adults, and we're not going to be, we're not going to be.
That's one thing that I'm kind of like in between how to explain that's why I'm kind of struggling, because how do I explain to my daughter that? So I'll give you an example. We just found out today, we just got the results today, that she's allergic to cow dairy. So we've had like an interventions chat just literally before they left in the morning. And she's the way we described it to her, they said, look, anything with cow's dairy you can't have, because it's going to flame your skin and your eczema right now. So we're going to try doing that. And she's been fine, but I think in the past when we've said it like off the cuff, she's got upset straight away, because it feels like we're just denying her without a reason. So is there like we should be choosing when we should, or how? I guess the question is, there should be a time and place, or we should structure these conversations properly rather than doing it like when they're just not expecting it, kind of thing.
100%. I mean, you want to make sure your child is calm and ready to listen, ultimately, or they're just not going to hear it. So I think it's important to just make sure you're in a calm environment, your child is feeling calm, and you choose your timing and your wording correctly, because that's a triggering situation. No child wants to be different from the others. No child wants to know that they can't eat ice cream, right? So
that's what we told her today. We said to her, you know what, ice cream majority, they all use cow's dairy, but there are dairy-free options that we can look into, and we'll get you a separate version of that for you. So like, I think as long as like we've given like an alternative, or I guess it's that actually, if there's an alternative available, then we get around that. So it doesn't feel like she's just, for example, for her, it doesn't feel like she's just like not allowed to have anything.
Given her choice. And if you'd have just told her, no, you can't have this, you're taking all of her choice away. And I'm an adult, and I'd struggle to regulate if you told me I couldn't eat ice cream, my mum. So I think by providing her with a choice and giving her solutions, you've automatically set her up to kind of be able to deal with this a lot better. And I would maybe just, preempt those situations where it is going to be uncomfortable for her. And again, it's all opportunities to practice. So rather than the first time she goes to a party and there isn't an option, or she's got to have a different option, maybe next time you guys have friends over, make a point of having multiple options there for her. So she's starting to be able to practice those situations of, I'm really upset because I can't have that, but it's okay because I can do this. And I think it goes exactly back to that step 2 of identifying those triggering situations. Just identify them, help your child to understand how they might feel in that situation. And then when we get onto step 3 and they've got some strategies, give them the opportunity to practice.
Brilliant. So you said step 1, emotional literacy. Step
2 is identifying your situations that trigger big emotions. Step 3 is developing those practical strategies that children can use to regulate their emotions. So they understand what they're feeling. They know when they might feel a big emotion. They know when they are feeling or about to feel a big emotion. And then you help them to develop, as I say, tools and strategies they can use before they become overwhelmed and lose control. So they can be anything from mindfulness activities, meditation, yoga, Some children like physical resources, like therapy putty. Obviously, it's very individual to the child, their stage of development, so on and so forth. But it's about finding strategies that children can use, as I say, before those big emotions become overwhelming. And again, just giving them lots of opportunities to practice them.
Brilliant. You mentioned step 2, triggers, and that's a new word that I've learned over the last, I think, year or so. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, you be mindful of your own triggers and find out why it's triggering you. How's that experience been for yourself personally?
I am still identifying my own every day, and I think what I do for a living helps me to do that, because obviously I'm supporting other people to do it. I think for children, it's a good practice to have in place as soon as possible, really, because then as they go through these situations, they're almost more prepared for them not to be as triggering, if that makes sense.
How do you explain to a child that this is a trigger, or do you just say, look, this is, I'd like to hear from yourself, like, when you describe what a trigger is to a child, or you don't?
I just say it could be a situation, a place, a time of day that can make you feel a big emotion. So it literally needs to be as simplistic as that.
Brilliant. That is actually brilliant.
And it's important because, as I say, if we can get our children to do it now, they're not going to do what we as adults find ourselves doing, which is that deep dive into our triggers and why we have them and what caused it. The hope is they're already prepared to be able to manage that as they grow.
And me, when I think about my triggers over the past year or so, and like you said, you kind of learn about your triggers because you can't really pick what your triggers are. You're going to find out when it actually happens to you. So I've realized that with some of my triggers, I've realized that some of them is based on my own biases that I've had in the past. And what do you think about biases as an adult? I think as a child as well, maybe. I don't know. Would children have biases as well?
I think they can. I think, again, it depends on the circumstances in which they're living, right? And their own experiences. I know that I probably had some biases as a child. You probably did by 13, 14 unconsciously around divorce.
Yeah.
They tend to only really come to the surface as we get old enough to understand them. I think, as I say, it's a shame that these things are only really coming to light now, because, as I say, you have how many millions of adults who have their own biases that they probably shouldn't have, and are now dealing with the effects of them. And it's why we do what we do and try to get in there at the earliest possible stage, is to avoid that. I mean, I always try to tell people, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, who you're with, you could literally fly to the most remote part of the world. The person you are always going to be locked up with is the voice in the back of your head. So try to make it kind, because if it's unkind, that can be a really not very nice experience.
Definitely. Go into, and I didn't mention this here, it's just come up as we're having this conversation, emotional trauma, because as I mentioned to you, my parents were divorced, and then you start to realize, oh crap, that this is actually affecting me. And there's a guy that I'm gonna have on my podcast, and I think it would be interesting for you to have a watch when I get him on. And he basically says that, people talk about, oh, take this, take that, take this supplement, take that. And he goes, forget all of that, forget all the gluten-free stuff, forget all the dairy stuff. It's all started from emotional trauma when you were a child, and everything that's happened to you as a child. That's why you're feeling a certain way. That's why you're getting these diseases later on in life. And once you sort that out, then your mind will be clear. It's a mind-body connection, as is quite common in these circles. This mind-body connection, once your mind is clear, then everything else will flow smoothly. So what do you think of what do I call it? Yeah. What do you think of emotional trauma?
So as I say, I just spoke on adverse childhood experiences at the All Party Parliamentary Group, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So your parents divorcing was an adverse childhood experience. Now, when a child experiences trauma or adversity in childhood, the minute they experience the first one, their likelihood of experiencing another increases. Once a child has experienced 4 or more adversities in their life, and that can be You have elements of, you know, emotional abuse. A parent being in prison is an adverse childhood experience. As I say, parental separation, one of your parents suffering with mental illness. Once you
Is
get
it physical abuse? Like when you see that as a child, it's a big thing.
Exactly. These are all different adversities. And when you get to 4 or more of those experienced in your childhood, your chances of everything from cancer to poor mental health to going to prison yourself significantly rise. So trauma and adversity in childhood has significant impacts on your life outcomes across the board, and it's an extremely important topic that needs to be addressed, hence why we were speaking about it recently, because it all feeds in.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if you went to the NHS, for example, would that be under the umbrella of stress?
It depends. As you may know, there is a huge postcode lottery when it comes to mental health services under the NHS. I mean, CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, at last statistics I looked at, there's over 400,000 children on the CAMS waiting list.
Wow, that's a lot.
Half of them won't even be seen because they won't cross the threshold for needing treatment, because the state of the system, it's fundamentally broken, unfortunately, which is obviously a bigger conversation for a longer podcast.
Yeah.
But it's a tricky one. And again, it's one of the reasons mindfulness is here and why we deliver things like the community interventions, because there is just very little to none when it comes to access to services for child and adolescent mental health at the moment. And it's worrying. It's really worrying.
Wow, that is crazy. That is crazy. So like, how do you think it's going to change then?
I think it's a much bigger question. I think from my perspective, I think there is a lot of structural inequality in this country. That means that depending on your race, your economic
Where you live as well, right?
where you live, you can be born with double the chance of suffering poor mental health than somebody somewhere else who is of a different race. And I think, as I say, we have this inequality structurally that literally does perpetuate generational cycles that end up in negative mental health outcomes. So they're generational cycles of poverty, of mental illness, of contact with the criminal justice system. And until we address the root causes, so as an example, poverty, there's 4.2 million children in this country, Omar, living in poverty. In the UK in 2023.
In the UK in 2023.
My
and she said the amount of kids that actually don't have money for food is unbelievable. I'm like, what? Like they actually don't have money to eat and they're just about getting school clothes. So it's you know, you want because we're talking about it and hopefully people listen here, take this into account. I just got, how is this happened? How is this happening as well? Like, why are people still in poverty in the UK?
I think without going massively into the politics of it, which I would love to do, but I'll be here all day, I think there was a period, so over 25 years ago, the UK was actually the first European country to legislate on child poverty. And they made a commitment to eradicate child poverty in this country by 2020. There were lots of different initiatives that went into that, including through the benefits system. We had community services called Sure Start centres, which were there for early intervention for families. And when that was a core governmental aim, it worked, and child poverty numbers actually reduced by 600,000. We then had a change of government, and the focus changed to tackling unemployment as a root cause of child poverty.
Right.
Numbers have now risen like crazy. It clearly is very short-sighted to focus on just unemployment as the cause of child poverty. And I can exemplify that for you by the fact that of that 4.2 million children that I told you live in poverty, over 70% of them have one working parent. So these parents are doing what government's asked of them. They're actively employed to improve their outcomes. But because of gaps in the system, they're being left vulnerable and probably worse off for working. A really quick way to explain it is, you may have seen that during the Tory party conference, the announcement was made that the living wage, the minimum wage, is being increased. Now, if you're a low-income working family, you're going to receive this extra money, but for every extra pound you make, the government takes 55 pence off your universal credit. So it comes in this hand and 55% of it goes out of that hand. And that's the kind of inequality that leaves these families vulnerable and leaves us with the disgusting statistic of 4.2 million children living in poverty in the UK. That's not today's data, and that will rise because of the current economic crisis and the cost of living crisis, right? We're going into winter now. It's going to get harder for that. That number will rise.
Yeah, crazy. That's crazy. Just to lighten up, I got a bonus round for you, so you didn't expect this. So I just want quick answers, and I'd just like to hear what you think. So, question one: what's the best way for you to relax?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Yoga.
Okay.
Yoga.
What is your favorite quote?
If we don't stand up for our children, we don't stand up for anything.
Oh, that one. Your best advice to kids?
Every emotion is normal and okay. And everyone experiences them.
What would you advise yourself? What would you advise for your younger self?
This sounds silly, but it will be okay.
Oh, I've heard that one. We've had that as well. Favorite holiday?
What are we talking, as in holidays like Christmas or destination?
Destination. Favorite destination?
Well, my dad's from Mauritius, so I feel like I have to say that, right? Otherwise I'm in trouble.
What kind of books do you recommend in this kind of in this field of mindfulness?
I think if you're talking about parents, I think there are some really good books out there, literally just on Amazon now. Just search emotional regulation for children. I think there are some really, really good books out there, and they're starting to break things down into simplistic language. So I think if we're talking on this topic, there's a range of them. On emotional regulation for children. I think if you're looking at it from an adult's perspective, I really like books like The Mountain Is You and Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? They're just kind of about self-reflection and kind of self-esteem and confidence, and but obviously aimed at adults. But actually, as a parent, I've learned quite a lot from them as well. The Mountain Is You is a really good one.
I think it's called The Book That I Wish My Parents Read or something. Have you read that book?
I have.
And what do you think? I haven't read it yet. It's by called Pippa something, I think the name is.
It's really, really good. Again, clear, relatable language. And I know as a parent, and again, it feeds into what we do at Mindfulness. I, as a parent, especially if I'm worried about my child's mental well-being, I don't want to sit in a room or read a book where I am made to feel less than because my child is struggling. And this book doesn't do that. It breaks things down into really clear, relatable language. And it is actually, that should have been my first pick for parents. That's a really, really good starting point.
The book on my I don't know, I think I'm reading too much health stuff where it's like, oh, the blue light is going to affect my sleep and stuff like that, which it does. Like, I'm getting my kids like to not use screens anymore. You can't help it sometimes, but you know, you can time regulate it and be like, look, you got an hour now, go ahead, and then that's it. But I've got it on my ebooks. I guess I'll probably try to read it during the day, but what I'm trying to do here at the health spa, I'm reading so many things, trying to get my qualifications done. So it's I'm definitely
read for pleasure as well, Omar, as well. I think I know I'm in the same situation as you. Often we read so much for work stuff, and it's not that we're not interested in it, but don't forget reading can be a mindfulness activity. So make sure you're reading for pleasure, even if it's just a magazine.
That's a good point.
Definitely.
Okay, great. So 3 tips that you recommend for mindfulness for children or for adults for their kids. Does that make sense?
Yep. So first things first, I would say the modelling, as we spoke about earlier. Model developing your own emotional literacy, model regulating your own emotions. So, you know, even if it's something like somebody cuts you up in traffic and, you know, you've not regulated your emotions very well, I often have to turn to my daughter and say, Mummy was really scared when that happened and I didn't regulate my emotions very well. I probably shouldn't have said that naughty word. What could I have done differently? And actually, I'm then giving her an opportunity to go, Mum, you could have tried breathing, or you could have tried this, or so just model and keep those lines of communication open. I think that's super important. Secondly, as an actual practical strategy, if there is one thing I taught my daughter first, I would recommend to any parent, is teach them some simple breathing exercises. You can find them on YouTube. We publish lots of free resources for parents on our website. There's some there. But our educational psychologist, Kate, always says, your breath is your best friend because it's with you everywhere you go. So by teaching your child some really simple breathing exercises, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, they can regulate their emotions. It doesn't require a physical resource. And as your children get older, as I say, my daughter's now 13, what's really good about them is they're discreet. So my 13-year-old sat in a secondary school, probably isn't going to get out some therapy putty anymore and play with it in the middle of class, but she can sit there and quietly and discreetly go through some breathing exercises and support herself. And I think that's key. Thirdly, look after yourselves. Being a parent is no easy task, especially in today's world. There are so many things that we have to worry about for our children, protect them from, think about, police. Like it's not easy, and you cannot pour from an empty cup. You are no good to your children if your own mental well-being isn't there. So I think actually that's the one I'm going to leave it on, is look after yourselves. You cannot support your child's mental well-being if you're not supporting your own.
What does health mean to you?
Oh, I'm going to be a bit controversial here. So for me, health means not facing any type of physical or mental illness because of disadvantage. It means, like I said, not being born with a much higher chance of being mentally or physically unwell just because of your race, your economic status, the community you live in. It's essentially equal access to positive health outcomes for all of us. I think that's it for me.
It's amazing. So that's a new answer. Everyone's answer I've had is quite similar, but yours is totally different. I love that. I love that. Brilliant. So where can everyone find you?
So our website is obviously mindfulnesswith2eyes.com. As I say, we do publish a lot of really high quality free resources on there that parents and educators can go and use. Some are kind of digital, some you can just print off, but we've got a real wealth of free resources there. We are on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram under @Mindfulness, again with 2 eyes. And yeah, if it's helpful to anyone, we also send out a free monthly newsletter that has kind of up-to-date information, and again the free resources attached, and that can be signed up to on our website.
Why the 2 eyes?
My daughter is Mia with 2 eyes.
I like that. That's
so
really
my daughter's Mia with 2 eyes. I loved the name, but just when I was spelling it, it didn't sit right. So I popped another I in there. And then I wanted to call the business Mindfulness. But obviously the domains and stuff for just Mindfulness were long gone. So I thought I'd do what I did with my daughter's name and just pop another I in there.
really cool. That's really cool.
Hey guys, hope you really enjoyed that episode. I know I did. It resonates with me a lot. I know a lot of people who work in schools, and even though those kids are going to school, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can afford the food day to day, They always got stuff going on at home. So, you know, what a conversation to have with Emma, and great tips that we can have with our children, because I have children myself, and, you know, I gave an example that I went through as well. So I really hope this episode helps. Please can you like, share and subscribe to Spotify, YouTube to help me get this channel going. I've been quiet recently, been very, very busy, but you'll have great conversations coming up. Next episode is with the legendary Patrick Holford, and he is one of the guys that got me into nutrition. So I really hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.